we have Tamara from Unbounce. She's the Chief Strategy Officer, and strategy is product marketing. So I guess she's also a product marketer. Tamara, please join me here on at the stage. And also, I would love to have your take here. Is like, do you own product marketing for Unbounce?
Hi, thanks so much for having me. Super excited to be here. And yes, I do. So product marketing is my craft and discipline. I've been a product marketer for about a decade now. And so the product marketing team does sit within me at Unbounce as well.
Nice. All righty. Well, you are going to talk about identifying and multiplying the best type of customers. So I'm going to get out of your way and the stage is yours.
Amazing. I'm just getting us all set up. All right. I feel like Jared kicked me off perfectly because he talked about identifying your ICP, and that's what this whole session is going to be about. It's one of my very favorite topics to talk about with product marketing, this idea of customer segmentation. If you want to follow along today or access any of the resources I mentioned, I have built a landing page as well. You can access it at bit.ly/map framework, and I'll throw that up a couple times for you to grab. Before we jump in, though, I just want you to think about, can you name your company's best customer segments? And perhaps the answer is yes, but then think about, could 10 of your coworkers also name your company's best customer segments? And when you start to think about that level of alignment, most people will say, well, unfortunately not. And what we see happen at many companies of all different sizes is that we have different teams who are each focused on slightly different customer segments. And this confusion is really creating a terrible end experience for your customer, right? Each team is thinking that they're doing a great job. They're hitting their OKRs, and they might actually be doing a great job, but they're just slightly off from building that momentum together. And we know that end customers are really feeling this. Relevancy is now table stakes, right? And so 71% of consumers say that they're frustrated when an experience is not personalized. 80% of customers say that the experience a company provides is just as important as its products and services. And so you may have the best product on the market, but if you're not delivering that relevant experience, your competitor is still going to win. And finally, 64% of the time when a customer switches from one brand to another, it's actually driven by this lack of relevance. So as I mentioned, this relevancy is totally table stakes now. And so really, when we think about customer segmentation or the product marketer's role within customer segmentation, it's really about identifying that best customer and then building these highly relevant products, experiences, go-to-market that will help you across the entire customer lifecycle, whether it's acquiring those customers, engaging them, or retaining them. And so I'm going to walk you through kind of a three-step process to identifying your ICP or your best customer. We're going to start by actually identifying that very best customer using your own data. We're then going to create segment profiles that are going to help you finally build that high converting go-to-market across the entire life cycle. So let's start with step one, identifying your best customers. Identifying your best customers could be a subjective exercise. I think we all have that story of that CEO or that founder who's like, this is the best customer, we must go after them. But you can take an objective approach. And so I've developed something called the MAP model, which helps you really use your own data to identify who those best customers are. The model starts with measuring volume, or essentially looking at all of your customer data and starting to cluster your customers based on shared attributes. You're then going to take those clusters of customers and you're going to analyze the performance of them. You're going to see if any of these clusters of customers perform better than or worse than the average customer. And then once we've isolated the ones that perform better than the average customer, we're then going to go and look externally outside of your business to assess your potential to win the market should you focus on that type of customer segment. So we'll dive into each three steps. The first step and the most important step is obviously building a data set. This is a data-backed approach to segmentation. And so you're going to want to take any customer data that you have available, your current customer base, anyone who's ever made a purchase from you in the past, if you're in a subscription business, anyone who's ever trialed you in the past, and you're going to merge it all together in one Google Doc that you're going to be able to slice and dice how you want. And you're going to be looking for 4 different types of data: demographic data, geographic data, psychographic, and behavioral. And I have this call out here where you're going to want to merge this data with what we're calling account data. And really, account data is that unique identifier that you have that you can then use to merge all of these different threads of data together. And this is what's going to help you link that back to their subscription information, how much they're paying you, how often they're paying you, things like that. So I have a couple examples of the type of information that you might be looking for within each of these categories. I do want to just let you know it's okay if you don't have access to all of this information. Most businesses will not have access to everything, but this is just a couple examples of what you could be looking for. If you work in B2B versus B2C, you'll probably have different information available to you. And depending on how much you do have, you can always look to supplement that information. Clearbit is a really great way, especially if you're in B2B, that you can supplement things like business size, their annual revenue, even things like job title. And so once you have all of this information together, as I mentioned, really in like an Excel doc is all you need. It doesn't have to be any fancy software. We can actually start to slice and dice and identify those customer clusters. So you're looking for patterns within all of this data. But I do want to give a little bit of a warning that you may discover that you have a large group of customers that all share one attribute. And you may be tempted to say, aha, that is my very best customer. We have a lot of them. But just because you have a lot of them doesn't mean that they are your best customer. So don't just turn up the volume. And this is why that second step is really important. We want to identify those groups of clusters, but then we want to go on to that second stage to actually validate that they're performing well for your business as well. And so before we jump into step 2, analyzing performance, we want to make sure that we're writing a segment hypothesis here. And so after you've identified those clusters, kind of clearly communicate which clusters you're going to be taking with you into that second step so that you can then prove or disprove that hypothesis. When we get to analyzing performance, again, depending on your business, there could be totally different metrics that you might want to use to analyze and validate the performance. I've listed 4 that I use all the time and that I think are really important when looking at your customer segments. The first one is conversion rate. So this could be like freemium or trial to paid conversion rate, whatever makes sense for your business model. But is these customer clusters converting better or worse or the same as the average customer? Average revenue per user. Are these clusters more likely to pay more for your product or less likely? Churn and survivability. How quickly are you losing these customers and how long are they staying around? And then finally, lifetime value, obviously a really important one. How valuable is this customer cluster or this type of customer to your business? And so when we're validating performance, it's really important that we're validating the performance and then measuring it against each of the other clusters so we can identify which cluster of customers is actually performing better than the others, but also that we're validating it against the average customer as well. Because as we mentioned, what we're really trying to do here is pick out those few different customer segments that are driving high level of performance for your business. And so once we've established that you have a lot of them and that they're performing really well, we can then take the few preferred segments into the final stage. So here you've maybe narrowed it down to hopefully at least one cluster. And if you haven't found a cluster that's performing well, you're going to go back to step 1. But 1 to 3 customer clusters that you can then take into step 3. And here you really want to ask yourself, if I were to focus on this customer segment, could I actually win that segment in the market? And there's 3 different questions I ask myself when considering the answer to this question. The first one is, how large is the addressable market? Is the market large enough to support my growth ambition? You don't want to focus on a customer segment that's too small to actually match the growth numbers that you're predicting for your business. The second question is all around customer acquisition cost. How expensive is it for you to acquire these customers? Does it seem reasonable? Is it something that can scale with your business? And how are you acquiring these customers today? We've proven that you have a lot of them already, and so they must be coming from somewhere. But what are those acquisition channels? Are those channels scalable so that you can continue to bring in more of them? And then finally, competitive landscape. Are your competitors prioritizing these segments as well? Now, if the answer is yes, that's okay. You don't need to choose segments that only you are prioritizing, but it's really important to know before you go into your go-to-market whether or not it's going to be a competitive space, because that might change your strategy slightly. So once you've gone through these questions, hopefully you're going to be able to identify the customer segments that are best for you based on all 3 of those criteria. And you're going to be able to actually start creating go-to-market for them. And so before we just jump into building a website for them, building collateral for them, we want to actually understand more about who those customers are. So we've identified the type of customer, but we want to know more about the value that they're looking for. And so in order to do that, we're going to create something called a segment profile. And a segment profile is an artifact that you can use to enable teams across your entire company, from marketing to sales to product. And there's a really important concept to understand here, which is this idea of multiplying your best customers. And so because we took the time to really take a data-backed approach in step 1 in identifying our best customers, we now know that if we're able to increase the amount of those customers in our overall customer base, so increase the ratio of those customers and decrease the ratio of non-segmented customers, we're actually going to be able to improve all of those business metrics as well. And so really, we want to focus on multiplying these best customers. And in order to do that, we need to first understand and isolate the customer value that each of those customer segments is looking for. Because when we're able to communicate this value in a compelling and relevant way, that's when we know we're going to be able to acquire, engage, and convert them. And so in order to do that, as I mentioned, we're going to build something called a segment profile. This is kind of like a persona, but slightly different. And so you can see here, we want to clearly outline each of the 3 segments. I've just used 3. You might have 1, you might have 4. It will vary for your business. And then I've given some examples of things that you might want to include in your segment profile, from jobs to be done to feature preference to willingness to pay. And I'm going to walk you through how you can start to research and answer some of these questions for each of your customer segments. First, we'll take a look at the value proposition design model. This is by Strategizer. And in this model, it really gets at the heart of understanding what is the job to be done for each of your customer segments. And a job to be done is really the job that someone is paying your company to do for them. And so a job could be a functional, like a task-related thing, or it could be something that's like quite personal to them. And when a job is completed, hopefully it's either erasing a pain or delivering a gain. And so we want to make sure that we're understanding exactly for each segment, what is the job to be done? What are they coming to your product for? And then what are those pains that they want your product to erase for them? And what are those pains that your product or gains that your product has to create for them? And you're going to do this through customer interviews with each of your different customer segments. And so it's important that you're not just aggregating this across all of your segments, but identifying for each segment this unique information. And then once you've understood what is that value that someone's looking for, why are they coming to you, we want to understand and map it back to your product. How is your product actually solving that job? How are they actually erasing that pain? And we can do that by looking at their feature preference. And so what features are each of your segments preferring, and where do they see value? Where I've seen a lot of people go wrong with feature preference is they just send out a list, they do stack rank, and they say, okay, can you tell me, like, rank them from 1 to 10, what are the most important features? But what we get is a chart that looks something like this, and you can see it's almost impossible for us to see how much more someone prefers feature 9 rather than feature 1. And so I can't really do a lot of analysis off of this. But if we take a trade-off feature preference approach, or also called some max diff, then we get a lot more clarity. And so here, the real difference is in how we asked the customer the question. It's the same 9 features, but rather than asking them to stack rank them, we've asked them to select their most preferred feature and then their least preferred feature. And we're going to get a chart that looks something like this. Here, I can clearly identify for this customer segment, features 9, 3, 7, and 6 are highly preferred. And the bottom 5 features are not preferred at all. They have negative preference. I can also see that not only is feature 1 have negative preference, but it's like very negative. And so this could actually be a detractor feature that could prevent this particular customer segment from purchasing my product. And so you can see, hopefully, why this type of question provides a lot more clarity than the previous question. And so if we've done our good job and we've mapped all of our features and our product value back to the value that each segment is looking for, we next need to be able to answer the question of how much will each segment pay for this value? And now, again, you may be tempted to go out to each segment and just say, well, how much would you pay for this product? But most of the time, you're going to get a lowball answer because everyone wants a deal. And so instead, a really simple way that you can do it as a product marketer is to do a Van Westendorp. A Van Westendorp is a price sensitivity survey. It's simpler than it sounds. And essentially, all you need to do is ask your customer segments 4 questions. You ask, at what price would you consider the product to be so expensive that you would not consider buying? To be getting expensive, but you would still buy? To be a bargain and a great buy for the money? Or to be so cheap that you would actually question the quality of the product? So now you're going to get all of the answers back, and you're going to plot a chart that looks something like this. You can see this gray bar in the middle. This is actually where all 4 of the questions intersect. And this gray bar is the range of willingness to pay for each of your customer segments. And so if you're going to choose a price point on the bottom end of the gray bar, you're probably going to get a slightly lower average revenue, but perhaps a higher conversion rate. And then vice versa if you choose it on the far right end of the bar. And again, I just want to be explicitly clear that you're going to want to do this exercise for each of those customer segments, not just an aggregate of how much all of your segments are willing to pay, because we really want to get to the nuance of if one of those segments is willing to pay more than another, so that we come to price and package your product, that we're actually pricing it for value. So hopefully by now you have most of the inputs you need to build your segment profile. You'll notice that at the bottom of the segment profile, I've included an area where you can put the core value prop. This will come out of all of that work you did with the strategizer model. But of course, in order to actually enable all of those teams and to actually build really great go-to-market, we're going to need more context into that positioning. And so I also recommend that you actually build a positioning and messaging framework for each of your segments. I've provided an example here from the Product Marketing Alliance, but you can choose one from anywhere. But what you're going to want to do is actually build a messaging framework for each of your core customer segments. And since we're chatting about winter today as well, I highly recommend that you also test this messaging and positioning with customers who are in your segment, both customers and non-customers, to really make sure that this messaging is resonating with them before you fully roll it out. All right, so now that we understand who our best customers are, we've captured the value, we understand how to price and package that value, how to communicate that value, we're ready to actually build this high converting go-to-market. And really the goal here is to build segmented customer journeys. We know that when an experience is segmented, it feels more relevant. And relevancy is key to retaining those customers, as we saw at the stats at the very beginning of today's chat. And so here I've given a couple examples of different experiences that you might want to consider across the customer journey. These are all opportunities to provide a segmented experience. And you want to do a bit of an audit. You want to ask yourself, am I delivering a segmented, relevant, and great experience? Or am I delivering a generic and kind of negative experience for my customers? And you may want to start by optimizing the experiences that are kind of on the negative end of your audit. I'm going to walk you through 2 brands that I think are doing a good job at delivering segmented experiences, just so we can see how some of this comes to life out in the wild. The first one is a company called Lessonly. And you can see with Lessonly, as soon as you arrive on their website, they make it abundantly clear who they're for, and they provide really clear buying flows. And so I land here, I go to the navigation bar, and I can see that Lessonly is for, they literally use those words, customer service teams, sales teams, and talent teams. And then what's even better is if I click into one of those, it takes me to a page that tells me a narrative that resonates completely with me. And so here on the left-hand side, I have talent team page, and on the right-hand side, I have the sales team page. And you can see that they're almost identical. From a design perspective, they are identical except for the imagery. But what's different about them is that they're actually highlighting different benefits. And so they've done the work that we talked about in step 2 to identify what are those core value propositions, what are the benefits people are looking for. And they've tailored the messaging for each of the customer segments. And this allows it to feel very relevant. It's the exact same product for both customer segments, but how that segment will perceive the value is completely different. What I love even more is that, say you're interested and you're like, yeah, I want to take a tour. The tour allows you to self-segment into your segment again. So here I can say, yep, I'm a sales team. And then instead of providing a generic tour, it's providing me a really curated tour of how I might use the product as a sales team. And it's using language that's totally going to resonate with me. So you can see here in the second box, it says, we help sales teams ramp new hires, enable with ease, and close more deals. If they were just providing a generic experience, they would never be able to use that highly relevant language. And you can tell that with this relevant language, you're much more likely to say, yeah, I want to start a trial, or I want to have a demo, rather than if something was a bit more generic. I want to give another example from Unbounce, which is where I work. At Unbounce, when we did all of this hard work to identify our best customers, we realized that our website really wasn't providing the sense of belonging that we were looking for. And so we completely redesigned our website to really resonate with our target segments. And so similar to Lessonly, when you arrive at our site and you go to the navigation bar, you can see really clearly that we make it easy for our core customer segments to navigate around the site. As you scroll down the homepage, we also clearly call out who our customer segments are so that they feel like they are in the right place and that they have this sense of belonging. And when we start to talk about why Unbounce makes sense for these core customer segments, we're incorporating something called the voice of customer. So we're actually using the language that these customer segments would use themselves, to describe their pains, to describe the gains they're looking for, to make sure that when they're reading this content, it fully resonates with them and they feel heard and seen. And then finally, we've even gone as far as updating our resources section. So we want to make sure that everyone can find the resources that they need, but that this is particularly true for our core customer segments. So you can see here, when you navigate to the Learn section, the navigation bar that we have on the left-hand side under categories, we've actually created categories for our core customer segments so that all they need to do is click one little button and they'll be able to see all of the inspiration they need for their business. So that's really it for today. Hoping you found this valuable. I just want to do a quick recap before I hand it back to Pep. But we took the time to identify our best customers using the MAP model. So we measured the volume of our customer base, we analyzed performance, and then we prioritized potential. We then really took the time to understand the value that our core customer segments were looking for. And we applied all of that information to build high converting go-to-market, hopefully customer journeys. It's been such an honor to chat with you today about one of my very favorite topics. And if you want to know more about customer segmentation, I've actually built a whole masterclass on this with the Product Marketing Alliance, and I got a coupon code exclusively for everyone here today. You can use the code WINTER10 in the sign-up flow. And if you want to chat any more about anything related to product marketing, you can follow me on LinkedIn and reach out.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. We will definitely do that. We also have time for questions.
Sure, yeah.
So let's start here. So Alexandra is asking, when looking at segmentation, how do you navigate a situation where you don't have quality data? How can you confidently do stages 2 and 3?
Yeah, that's such a tricky one. Obviously, the better, higher quality data you have is ideal. I would ask, what is high quality data? Is it that you don't trust the data you have, or is it that you don't have enough data? Because I think I would answer that differently. If you don't trust the data you have, then I would say just try to strip the data down to the things that you know to be true. Or that could be a time where you actually can use Clearbit to maybe supplement and you have a bit more confidence in that. Or if you're really starting from a place where you're like, I don't really think that's accurate, or I don't have enough information, you can try to gather that information before you do the analysis. So you can actually go out, maybe do a customer survey. We actually did that. So once we did step 1 and we identified who our best customers were, we realized we didn't know a few key things about them. So we actually changed our onboarding survey for all net new customers, so that when they come in the door, we're collecting the right information about them. And then we did a customer survey to the existing customers who fell within that segment to really gather more of the information we thought we needed to then move into step 2 and 3.
Wonderful. Yeah, at Winter we used the Clearbit example that you used.
Yeah.
So we put basically all the email addresses of the buyers who paid us real money, and shoot back who these people are. And actually, we were very surprised, because a segment that we thought is, somewhere in there was actually 80% of the money. It was like, wow. Eureka! It was very insightful. All right, Claudio here is asking, what will be the minimum number of paying users, as a range, let's say, to identify the best customer?
Yeah, that's a great question as well. So I know with Jared's presentation, he was talking a bit more from like an enterprise perspective. And I think it could work with both. It just depends on if you're looking for statistically significant. So we work in the SMB market and, more in the product-led space. And so we have access to thousands of pieces of data. However, if you're working in enterprise business, it just might be a bit more manual. So that's fine. Like if you only have 100 or 200 customers, you can still do this exact same exercise. It's just going to be easier for you to see the trends because you're not going to have to go through, thousands of different pieces of customer data. You'll probably just approach the exercise slightly differently. You'll actually look at every single customer, start to think about what they have in common versus a lot about what I talked about was taking thousands of pieces, and it's going to be a bit more manual, I guess, slice and dice to see, okay, where are the patterns?
Right, exactly. I would agree. With a smaller sample size, it's actually easier.
Yeah.
You can just eyeball it. You don't need
Exactly.
any fancy spreadsheet magic here. All right, next question here. How can we make taking feedback for your product easier?
Yeah, from the customer segments, I think that's a really great question. We provide different areas for customers to provide feedback. And we specifically, when we're looking for feedback from our customer segments, we actually we'll build kind of like our reference groups or our core customer groups around our segments, and then we'll go to them to get feedback. So we use surveys a lot or one-on-one interviews. And I know there's a huge debate on whether you should pay your customer to spend time with you or not. We usually will offer something like an Amazon gift card for their time, just to be thankful for them for giving some time to us. And we found that to be an effective way. So both surveys or one-on-one. And we kind of, once you've identified your core customer segments, you want to make sure that you can easily identify them so that all of the different teams can action on it, whether it's the product team, the customer marketing team, the marketing team. And then once you have that in your data set, you can easily just filter, okay, just show me people in our core customer group, send them an email and ask them to participate in providing feedback. And then you're already kind of filtering out feedback from your segments versus feedback from non-segments.
Exactly right. Yeah, I would add here some tool recommendations. So if you're enterprise, use Abilla, amazing for in-product feedback. If you're B2C, UserLeap is the name of the game. B2B SaaS companies, I like refiner.io, I believe. So some good tools to integrate inside your app there. And one last question here. So how can you gain back trust lost by previously failed launches?
Oh yeah, gosh, that's a hard one. I guess it would depend on why the launch failed. I'm just reading the example here. Launch product too early or buying experience was awful. Yeah, launch product too early is an interesting one because I really believe that you need to get the product to market sooner than later and really allow the customer to actually help shape the development of that product. And so as long as you're positioning it as a product that is in beta or something that is evolving, then hopefully that can help minimize the risk around this. But if you feel like you didn't minimize the risk, maybe you overpromised and under-delivered, I think just being open and honest and transparent with customers is really important. I've also seen this happen where maybe something was available in beta to all plans, and then after beta, it got taken back from some plans, and that was a bad experience for customers. The buying experience being awful, that's a tricky one as well. I think I would want to know more around what made the buying experience painful. Was it like the buying flow? Was it an experience with a sales rep? But again, with customers, I truly believe in being transparent and kind of owning if a mistake was made, if you made that mistake, because at the end of the day, we're real people behind a business and we're interacting with real people as our customers. And I think that human level is actually where you can build connection and trust.
I would add to your point, if the internet is full of bad reviews, how you suck, well, change the name and brand. And, if you're under 10 million in revenue, basically nobody knows you exist. You can change everything overnight and nobody will notice. So that's the beauty of being small. If it's like HubSpot and they're like, it's terrible, that's game over. Well, actually, no, they're so big, they're too big to fail now.
Well, and most things in SaaS are iterative too, right? So hopefully it's just part of the journey and it's not, okay, we've launched something and it's final and we can't change it.
Like Reid Hoffman said, if you're not embarrassed by your first, launch, then you waited too long.
That's exactly it. Yeah, that's exactly it.
Okay, cool. Tamara, thank you so much.
Thank you.
We'll find you on LinkedIn.
For sure. Chat soon.
Peace.
Bye.